I want to talk a little bit this morning about the body and just what happens in the body during this process, and at least what has been happening here in this body during this process. And just based on different things that I've heard, it seems like perhaps I've had a little bit of a more extreme experience with this. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't really have anything to compare to. But this body, the energetic movements through this body have been extreme. Like really extreme. And it actually started a few years ago. 3 years ago about is when the physical discharges started. And it was right after I had played with TRE, or trauma release exercises, and for some reason it kind of something clicked in the body, and there was a recognition of, oh, the body is just doing these doing these movements, discharging this energy, and it had nothing to do with me. And so there was something opened, and there was just this natural flow of discharges that began all of a sudden about might have been more than that, 3.5 years ago. And it has been kind of on and off since then. There's phases where it's much more extreme. I think now it's less physical discharges. Initially it was convulsing and very extreme shaking and muscle spasms and contractions, almost like getting like a Charlie horse in your calf, but throughout the whole body. And it would literally, the energy would move throughout the body, like it would maybe be in a leg, and I would feel it move through the leg and then move up the back and then over to the other side. And it was actually pretty chill, fam. Luna's getting a little rambunctious. Probably because my energy is kind of intense the last day, and the puppies feel that. But so yeah, initially it was really just like moving kind of from side to side, or not side to side necessarily, but it would move throughout the body, and I would just be like a kind of a curious watching of like, whoa, this is wild. And so that's actually been a big part of my unfolding, has been physical stuff, because I think it offered, or what it feels like is it almost offered a way to bypass certain beliefs, or to, maybe bypass is not the right word, but to discharge things in the body without getting hung up on what stories associated with this. And I think there was also just so much bullshit here in this body, like so much trauma and just so much energy, so much that was being held onto, that it required like those extreme levels of discharging. And literally now it's, I think, going on year 4 of that. And it has calmed down for sure. And now it feels more, there's just days where, or nights where sleep just doesn't come. And there's, sometimes, actually often it'll be precipitated by some sort of small physical discharge. Like for instance, last night there was a discharge that happened in some of the muscles in the back of the neck and up through the back of the skull. And just like there's been a softening starting just in this general region, in the head region. And so it was kind of precipitated by that. And then it feels like something will open, and then there's just like this coursing, just intense energetic coursing throughout the whole body. And so it's just, nights like that, oftentimes sleep just doesn't come. And so there's just a laying, and, it'll kind of go back and forth between laying in the darkness and sitting up in stillness and silence and doing, what you might just some silent sitting, and trying to attune to, you know, just the beingness and the I am sense. And but it's just like just so much energy movement, and it doesn't manifest anymore so much as like the physical shaking and the physical discharges. That has really softened a lot, but it's still very intense. I think what it kind of feels like is the system is just getting acclimated or used to just more and more intensity of energy movement. And as things are unblocking, there's just bigger surges that are able to move through. And so there's an acclimating that has really happened throughout this whole process, throughout the past few years. And it seems like what happened here was that the energetic movements, maybe you could call it like a kundalini type of thing, because there was an aspect of like feeling energy centers and things like that. And there have been, as this process has gone on, a really deep attunement to feeling physical contractions in different areas of the body, or just kind of intuiting that there's just stuckness in a certain area, and then that will naturally start to open. And it's funny that for a while, after the physical discharges started happening, just naturally, that aspect of it always felt really natural. And there was, it seemed like there was just like an intuitive, just letting go into that. But then there was this like mind that was very much still online, and this personality that was trying to help things along, and, doing different techniques with like trying to release tight muscles and like self-massage and all these things. And there's just this trying to help something along. But I think what I've realized in retrospect is that was not necessary. Maybe, it's what happened, but that was not actually really necessary. It was just like a letting go and letting the discharges happen naturally. And it didn't actually need my help. It didn't need Jennifer's help. So it's just kind of funny to look back at that and realize how much trying was associated with that. And now it's just a very natural thing, and it kind of ebbs in and ebbs out. And there's days where something will open and just the energy will really open, and sleep often is really broken or unrestful, but it's not really a problem anymore. It's just what it is. There's not like a laying in bed and like, oh, I'm not getting any sleep, I need this much sleep, I need to sleep, am I ever gonna fall asleep? It's just okay, it's more just like there's kind of uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable physically in the body. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing with this. But I'm trying to think of what else I can speak to around this, because it's been so central here, so central to just the way that this thing is hooked up and oriented has just really been attuning to the body, and attuning really subtly, and it's kind of cool actually when I think back to, I don't know, 10 years ago when I first went into psychotherapy. And I remember I had a therapist that worked with somatic experiencing. And I remember one of the first times that, and really probably anybody in my life, but it happened to be my therapist, asked me like, what are you feeling in your body right now? And I had no idea how to answer that question. I was like, I don't know. Well, what emotion are you feeling? I don't know. Like, where do you feel tension? I don't know. Like there was just such a deep disconnection, such a dissociation from physical sensations in the body. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting and cool to just what a stark contrast that is. Like, especially in the last few years as this process has unfolded, just what a deep attunement, like how deeply attuned, like this thing is to this body and the sensations. And really just that becoming like such a guide in a way and such a big teacher that those sensations are pointing to ways that there's a story or a belief that's kind of being held, you know. I don't know if you can hear the little pitter patter of doggy feet in the background. Getting wild and wonderful out here in West Virginia. So yeah, so just the energy in this body today just feels a little heightened, and it's actually pretty intriguing as well that is reflected so deeply in the animals. And it took me a while to realize that Bailey in particular is so sensitive, and you know, especially now that she's older and her energy is so level and balanced and just like deeply still so often that when her energy starts to get intensified, it's very obvious. And so I started using that as a mirror and realizing like, oh, she's panting, she's pacing. And it was always just like this thing that would this mirror that would reflect my, like this identity back to me. And that was just so helpful for me, was having that mirror and being able to have that feedback, you know, seemingly externally, and giving me constant feedback to check back in with the body and to check back in with the energy and to check back in with stories or beliefs that might be on loop, and just always like something to reground, which was so helpful. So she's like, Bailey has been my little guru, truly, like my teacher. And so I mean, and now that I have Luna, I mean, she's little, so it's a little bit harder to tell because she just has the excited puppy energy. But I noticed just the difference between the two of them, that my energy is much more grounded. So Luna is very grounded, you know, she still has the puppy energy, but is also very grounded and can be still and calm, which I don't know, I just find it interesting. I don't know that it means, you know, I don't ascribe meaning to it, but I find it curious and interesting and neat. It's neat. It's really neat. I love that word. Body. What else wants to come through? So it seems that what has been arising here is almost a transition to moving from body sensations to or I guess really like it was always moving from body sensations. It's just moving out of the idea that there's a person here that is in charge of the body movements or in charge of anything that's happening. So it's just like this resting, this dropping of attention from like the head space and this contracted feeling behind the eyes and in the head down into the body and resting there. And actually, my practice of shamanism and facilitating ceremonies has been a really, really interesting piece of this that I don't think that I've really spoken to at all in any of these videos. And I just want to preface this with, I definitely really don't recommend anyone trying to become like a ceremony facilitator or facilitate psychedelic ceremonies specifically to, you know, encourage anything inside of yourself, because this just happened totally naturally here, and I feel that would be really irresponsible to do. So just attune to whatever's happening in your life. And so this is just a sharing of what happened to arise here and how my life, the way that life was unfolding here, was just a perfect pointer, and just always bringing that pointer back into your own life and realizing that whatever is unfolding in your own life is already the most perfect pointer. You don't have to seek anything outside of what is already happening. So it's just a reminder of that. And I think this this story kind of displays this really beautifully, this pointer that your own life is exactly the pointer that is needed if we're willing to pay attention. So a few years ago, I started facilitating psychedelic ceremonies for people and learning how to do that. And that process was actually a really deep, learning to facilitate and hold that space with those medicines has actually been a really deep part of my own unfolding. And there was a realizing at one point, it was very fascinating, that there's just a very specific, I guess the way that I would describe it now is that there's just a very specific energy of holding the container of a psychedelic ceremony space. But actually now how I would describe that it's simply just, the full presence of being, and at the time it felt different. It was an unordinary state of consciousness, which is what they call that kind of stuff in shamanism, is people going into unordinary states of consciousness, simply because it's not the norm, but it's the state that exists when me and I isn't present. It's exactly the same thing. And there was something that clicked, and it started, early on. I started to realize, because sound healing is a big component of holding ceremony spaces. And I started realizing, like, oh, I'm being sung. I am an instrument. Like, there's no me here controlling these movements. The arm is just moving. The voice is just singing. The feet are just walking, or, whatever happened to be happening in the ceremony space at the time. And there was like, it kind of opened something, and it was just like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And I think it's in one of Jed McKenna's books that he says something along the lines of, like in regards to awakening and enlightenment, that something along the lines of, like, enlightenment isn't a place that you visit from here being like me. It's like, this is a place you visit from there. Like it, and I guess, like, to give that a little bit more context, or the way that I took that was something opened for me in facilitating, and I realized that what was being invited in my life, and I, didn't have the wherewithal to see it for, a year and a half or however long it was. But it finally opened, and there was a realizing that there was an invitation for that facilitating energy to be invited into the way that I operate all the time. Like that was the state. And it wasn't like a, wow, like mystic union, amazing. And because, like, I have gotten to a place where visions are almost none. It got to this place where it felt so ordinary and so natural. And I realized that, oh, that level of presence and attention and awareness and the dropping away of the identity, that's what's being invited to be brought into all of life. Like, this is the way that is, like, I'm being invited to bring this energy into just the beingness. And really what that was, though, was I'm being invited to die. Jennifer's being invited to die.